Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to A Study in Cinema Presents. This week we are talking the films of David Fincher. I am your host, James, joined by my co-host here,
Nathan.
And yeah, as you heard, so we are diving into the films of David Fincher, so it's going to be kind of similar as last 2 weeks. It's a bi-weekly podcast, so 2 weeks ago, we did Scorsese. I just went completely blank. Martin Scorsese films, where we watched as many as we could. In that case, it ended up being 5. In this week's case, or this 2 weeks case, it ended up also being 5 for me again. And then ranking them and talking about them. We're going to have a little bit different format to kind of help things on our end and maybe even on your all's end going forward. So, but we'll get to that at the end of the podcast. To start, just a general, how'd you feel about the David Fincher movie?
Going into it, of course, I was looking towards the classics. He's got 7, and I was really looking forward to the Zodiac rewatch.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize just how good he is at thrillers and suspense. Everything I watched was so well directed. But he is even better than I remember with the thrillers. That's
Agreed.
just like his best.
Agreed. That's his forte. Again, when he gets away from that, as we'll discuss with one of the movies that made my list, when he gets away from thrillers, he still does a great job as directing, but it's weird because it doesn't feel, and you already know which one I'm talking about. It doesn't feel like a Fincher film. That was my biggest issue with that movie, is I'm just like, after watching all of these thrillers, and then you watch that movie.
Yeah, I did the same thing.
And you're
almost.
Yeah. So, but same question that I asked last week. I'm going to ask again this week, and each give our opinions. I already have my number 1 answer to this question, and I have my number 2 answer as well. When you think David Fincher movie, now we've watched you said 6?
Yeah, I've got 6.
And then I watched 5. So, having watched a considerable amount in the past 2 weeks, when you hear David Fincher directing, what comes to your mind?
I can't say that a whole lot has changed because I associated him with thrillers beforehand.
Right.
But I guess now even more so the quality, because I knew the hits were quality, but everything I watched, even the stuff that I didn't particularly care for, a specific movie we'll get into probably very soon.
Yeah, it may be.
You still can't argue the quality.
Right, that's fair.
And that, and he has some I never really paid attention before, but he has some really good shots. It's not just the story and the thrilling story. He's got some good shots too.
True. I agree with all of that. My number 1 thing is rain. The dude loves rain scenes.
He does them right though.
Right. Like, you talk about good shots, and I'm one of these people that I'm a sucker for a scene in a movie, any kind of movie, I don't care what it is, when there's some kind of rain scene. So I can't argue. I mean, look, again, it's a good scene, it's a good shot. The Last Samurai, one of my favorite movies of all time. One of my favorite scenes in that movie is the fight in the rain. Mm-hmm. A good rain scene just looks cool. But Fincher, man, he loves it. I think the majority of 7, that movie, it was just raining.
I think every time there's an outside shot, it's raining, because this whole unnamed city is supposed to be bleak and
right. And then even in Zodiac, there's a couple notable scenes in the rain. I think in A Panic Room, there's a big rain scene. So I'm just like, man, he likes his rain scenes. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Oh yeah, Fight Club, obviously Fight Club.
I didn't get to rewatch that one, unfortunately.
It was good. It made my list. We'll get to where
everything made your list, technically.
True. And then next, speaking of you talk about 7, and you talk about Fight Club, and I didn't get to rewatch it, but Benjamin Button, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, guy likes Brad Pitt. You know, that's
so do I.
Same. We talked about Scorsese to Leo and De Niro. Well, with Fincher, you've got Brad Pitt on speed dial.
Yeah.
And not a bad thing. He's a good actor, and they work well together. So, without further ado, we will dive into the list so we can get into a little more detail on some of these movies. You picked The Last Director, so you went first with your number 5 last time.
Yep.
I picked Fincher, so I'll just start us off here with Mank at my number 5 spot. So I, once again, for us audio listeners, I have my handy dandy Google Docs. So I gotta look at my notes here. The notes I put was it's beautifully shot, and it was well acted. Gary Oldman is great in anything. Charles Dance I really like. Even Amanda Seyfried, who's kind of like a lesser, like I don't watch a lot of her movies, she did good in this. Lily Collins did good in this. I don't know the guy's name, I should have looked it up, but the guy that played Orson Welles did really good in this, because I am a big Orson Welles fan, and like the actual Orson Welles, so it was nice to see a good portrayal. I will say, first, it didn't feel a lot of Fincher. Again, it was more of a like slow burn kind of biopic, like old school Hollywood, so you didn't have that same Fincher vibe of like the thriller suspense or like this grungy alternative music playing over the credits.
Yeah.
But I respect it for what it was. Again, the black and white, I always loved the old Hollywood, even the sound design where it kind of sounds like it's like old school film shot.
I loved that.
I will say again, I do think it got better as it went on. I think the second half was better than the first half. The first half I was kind of in and out interest-wise, but it kind of pulled it together by the end. My biggest issue that I found myself comparing it to The Last Tycoon, which is an old movie back in I think the 70s or 60s, correct me if I'm wrong, and then they did a remake series, I want to say on Amazon, of The Last Tycoon, which is very similar. It deals with like a movie company and a director and stuff, and that old school Hollywood kind of vibes, also starring Lily Collins, ironically. And I kind of like The Last Tycoon better, so I'm like, well, if I was going to pick one, I'd watch that one. But I did still enjoy it. Like you said, it was very well shot, but that's why it's at my number 5.
Well, to go right along with that, since I watched 6, I have one mention. I don't know if I want to call it honorable. My number 6 was Mank.
Okay.
I'm just going to be honest. I did not get into this movie at all.
And that's fair. Yeah, I get it.
When you were like, you were in and out for the first half, that was me the whole time. I would try to get into it, and then I'm like, I don't understand what's going on.
Yeah, that's
like,
same.
It didn't seem like there was a cohesive story being told.
And I agree with that, yep.
It was supposed to be about like the writing of Citizen Kane, but I felt like most of the movie was everything else but him writing Citizen Kane.
They made one Rosebud joke, and that was it.
Yeah, I wanted more Orson Welles because he was good.
Yes.
Gary Oldman, of course, he did great, and it's shot well, and I liked the old sound. I always, movies always go for that old look, but not a lot of them go as far as to try to get that really crappy microphone sound.
Yeah.
But that's all the merit I give it. I could not connect whatsoever to the movie.
I agree. I mean, like I said, I literally put some moments felt too dragging. I understand it's a slow burner, but in this case, it was too slow for me. And then, like I said, it was
a slow burn with no payoff.
It's bad
whatsoever.
I do recommend when you get time the series, the Last Tycoon series. I'll figure out if it's Amazon or HBO, but I do recommend that because I kept thinking this puts me in the mind of The Last Tycoon, but I like The Last Tycoon better, which has Kelsey Grammer as like the main old director guy. Because it also has Jack Warner and Louis B. Mayer. Like, it has all that kind of same stuff in it.
Yeah.
But it's kind of... It kept my attention better. So.
Yeah, well, also, there's that Godfather show now about the making of the Godfather. I'm sure that's pretty good.
I want to watch that. Yeah.
But
you're number
I
5.
don't
So
have an actual number 5.
yeah. Let's get into your
And
actual
this
number 5.
list is pretty close. My 4 and 5 and my top 3 are real close. But
Okay.
number 5, I have to go with The Social Network.
Okay. I didn't get
So
around
this
to
was a
watching that one.
movie that I was curious about, but I was like, how's a movie about Facebook gonna be like that good?
Yeah, that's.
And then I watched it and I was like, dang, that was so good.
I need to
he
watch it.
makes this story, obviously, it's not all completely true. I mean, it is a movie,
Right.
but the movie's story is very thrilling. And there's not a whole lot of action. There's no detectives or anything going on, but you do get invested in, these characters and try not to associate them with what they are now, but
Yeah.
you do get invested in the characters and you start feeling for some of them, and then I don't know. I feel like the story was really good, whether it's wholly true or not.
Right.
But it was very thrilling for a movie about Facebook.
I need to watch it. I wanted to watch it. I've only seen the only thing that I'd seen is I've seen a couple scenes with Andrew Garfield in it because I'm a big Andrew Garfield fan.
Yeah, he did
and
great.
Some of his scenes looked really good and made me want to watch it. But like I said, I was going down the list, and then with everything going on, baby, and life-wise and work-wise, But I do.
All the actors were great. Even Justin Timberlake, who I'm a little spotty on as an actor.
Yeah,
Not
I can see that.
But he kind of gets typecast in the same roles all the time. He plays a jerk in this movie, and he plays it well. And the soundtrack, I gotta mention the soundtrack. It's so good.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. Fincher's soundtrack and music choices on some of these are so good. Now, granted, like I said, Fight Club 7 and Panic Room all just have this extremely grunge alternative 2000s rock music, and I love it though. Yeah, I love it. It's so nostalgic. Yeah.
Nothing like some 9 Inch Nails kicking in.
Right. So speaking of, my number 4 is Fight Club, which we're not going to talk about. It's the end of that review.
Yeah. That's rule number 1.
Yeah, and it's rule number 2 as well. It's rule number 1 and 2 is don't talk about Fight Club. So my notes here: late 90s, early 2000s vibes, similar to 7 in the highly stylized intro credits. That's the other thing. His credits are always some kind of weird, bizarre, you're weaving through
Yeah.
If you remember the old Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans, they did that a lot too, where they'd have some kind of nostalgic rock music
I don't
playing.
remember the credits.
And it would have the webs, and you're the camera's going through these webs, and it have the names up there, and Fincher does that a lot.
I miss stuff like that.
Same. Like I said, it was very nostalgic. Yeah, techno rock. That was the other thing I said. Brad Pitt is unhinged in this movie, but in the best way. Again, you talk about somebody playing kind of crazy and kind of playing he's just, I don't know, he's so crazy in this movie, but it's fun. It's a lot of fun when you watch him in some of his other roles, and then you watch him in this. It's really interesting. The other actors, obviously, Edward Norton, who, again, I like Edward Norton. I feel like he gets overlooked a lot. So it was nice to kind of see him in one of his better known roles, and he does really good. Helena Bonham Carter does great.
Always.
One thing I put is speaking of Edward Norton and Brad Pitt, their chemistry was so good together. I mean, obviously, if you know the big twist for the movie, spoiler alerts for any David Fincher movies, but if you know the big twist of the movie, obviously it makes it that much better when you realize how good their chemistry is playing off of each other.
Yeah,
and I also put it was a psychological trip of a film. It felt like he was on acid, like an acid trip or something. It was dark and gritty and wild, but I still really enjoyed it. Also, a shout out, speaking of David Fincher actors, Holt McCallany had a cameo in this movie. I guess you call it cameo. He was just one of the grunt soldier dudes in Brad Pitt's army, and he would go on to be known in one of my favorite David Fincher directed or produced things, which is Mindhunter. Holt McCallany plays Bill in that, so it was cool getting to see a real young version of him in Fight Club. So that's my
Nice. I
number
didn't
4.
get to watch Fight Club with this watching. I really wanted to because I need a rewatch. I watched that movie back before I had my current film tastes, and I absolutely hated it.
That's fair.
One of the few people that hated that movie. I didn't care for the twist. I was kind of bored all the way up into it, but this was a long time. So
Yeah.
I definitely need that rewatch.
Right. It's definitely a wild movie. It's definitely not one that I would watch a lot. I mean, it was my number 4, but it was fun. It was a fun watch. I'll say that.
Well, my number 4 is a movie that I didn't know what to expect from it because I didn't even know, like, I've heard of it, but I didn't know what it was about. It's The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Oh, yeah. I didn't get
So I
around to
used
that
to
one
get
yet either.
confused back in the day on Netflix because they had, like, the 2009 version of it,
Yeah.
which I think is the foreign one, and then Fincher has his, and I'm like, I never knew. I thought they were both the same movie.
I did too.
Back then. Turns out they're not.
Right. I just
But,
found that out this time around, too.
It was actually really good. I had a hard time picking which one I like more between this one and The Social Network, but it's more that straight, not quite detective movie, but there's a mystery going on, and Daniel Craig's at the center of
Daniel
it.
Craig,
This
yeah.
one's, he's really good in this movie. Kind of brings you back to like the Casino Royale days. Not as young as that, so maybe like the Quantum of Solace or Skyfall days, but
Okay.
I really loved him in it. Rooney Mara was really good.
Yeah. That's another name.
Unrecognizable. I did not know it was her until the credits were rolling, and I was like, wow.
Yeah.
She is brutal in this movie, first of all.
I need to watch it.
She's ruthless.
It looks really
In the
good.
best ways. And her and Daniel's chemistry of like polar opposites of people is perfect.
Right. Not two you would think to put together.
Yeah. Especially when Rooney Mara looks like she does in this movie. She doesn't even look like herself.
Except from
got,
all
like,
the
the
like
piercings and the black
trailers and
hair
pictures
and
and
tattoos.
stuff, it looks wild, yeah. But,
It is.
I mean, again, it looks
it's
like
a little slow.
Okay.
It takes a few minutes to get into it because at first I was like, oh, like at first it's one of those movies. I've noticed Fincher does this a few times where
yeah.
there's not a whole lot of build up. You're kind of thrown right into the start of a story,
Right.
and you're like, wait, what's going on? Like,
Yeah.
what are these people been talking about? And it starts that way a little bit, but it does pick up, and when it picks up,
Okay.
And I really loved it.
Okay, I'm gonna have to check that one out. And so, again, that is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I think the one was 2009, and then the other one's
This
what,
is
2011?
2011.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, for anybody out there,
One.
yeah, the Fincher one is the one that we are discussing, which maybe I'll go back and watch the 2009 one too. I don't know. So that brings us to number 3.
Top 3.
Top 3, and I have Panic Room. This was my first time watching this movie, and I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would. Kind of for similar reasons as to like all the other stuff. It's just such a throwback thing. It feels so nostalgic to that era of time. You know, I like the old school thrillers and old school movies.
Yeah.
And this just had that late 90s, early 2000s kind of like by the book, run of the mill suspense thriller, you know, that Fincher is great at. But again, he's great at it, and it's nostalgic. And you had it's the 4th Jodie Foster film that I've ever seen. So I'm trying to think. Right, yeah. So before I got with my wife, before we started dating or even got together, I had never watched a Jodie Foster movie. I have to admit, like up until maybe 2 years ago, I had never seen a Jodie Foster movie. And then the first one was when me and her got together. Obviously, she got me to watch Silence of the Lambs, which is notably the most well-known and best one.
Yeah.
And then watched a movie called The Artemis Hotel, or Hotel Artemis, that's what it is, where it's like an action-y movie that came out a couple years back, I think. But it was really good. And then with the Scorsese week, I watched Taxi Driver, which had a really young Jodie Foster, and then Fincher week, I watched Panic Room. But Panic Room is really good. She did really good in it, playing, you know, like a mom that's got to protect her kid, and these people invade the house, and they hide in side of a panic room, a big high tech panic room, big steel doors. Like, it's such a wild concept. But again, that was that time period, right? You know, all these movies, they just went for it. Also, Forrest Whitaker, one of my favorite underrated actors, doesn't get enough love, and he does great in this movie. Who else? Really young Kristen Stewart, back before the Twilight days. She was a kid here, and that was interesting. Jared Leto with cornrows, and just as a random thug.
I expect nothing less from him.
Right, why not? And Dwight Yoakam as a villain, as always. He's always a great villain.
Dwight Yoakam.
If you've ever seen Sling Blade, he makes one of the best villains. So, you know, it's a lot of fun. And again, I just really loved the concept of it. It's just a fun suspense thriller that I recommend everybody to check out at least once.
I was going to, but of course, you know, I didn't get to all the movies that I wanted to watch.
Same, yeah.
That was going to be one of my next ones, though, but sadly didn't have time for it. But this brings me to the crisis I've been having for about a few days now.
Interesting.
This top 3 is so close.
Okay.
And it's probably going to be a tad controversial for the Fincher fans.
Hey, that's my top 2. My top 2 is very close and tad controversial, so...
My top 3 is very close. And it was really hard deciding, because I'll just tell you right now, they're all 3 5-star films for me.
Okay.
So picking which one I like more than the other was so hard, and a lot of thought went into it. But to start us off, at number 3, I've got a movie about my favorite cold case of all time, in Zodiac. I know.
This is an upset.
For people that know me.
This is a shocker for me, especially, yeah, because, like I said, normally when we talk any movie, any cold case, it's always Zodiac is your go-to.
Yeah.
The movie and everything, so... Wow, and it's at number 3.
It's not anything that Zodiac did wrong. The reason it's at 3 is first because the other 2 movies are so good, but it's one slight difference in like preference about like story that puts this at 3 and not 1 or 2.
Right.
But the Zodiac Killer case is like my favorite cold case. It's the only one I've really like gotten into besides like Jack the Ripper. Those are my 2. But I remember I was looking up stuff because I had seen something somewhere about it, and then I found out there was a movie. It's like, oh, I gotta watch this movie. This was years ago, and I fell in love with Zodiac when I watched it. I watched it on TV, so you know, a long movie like that probably took me 4 hours to watch.
Right.
And I rewatched it again, and it's still amazing. It's still a 5-star. It's very I love how he captures the time without going full, you know, like Tarantino or anything. Like,
right.
You're not getting unnecessary shots of, oh, look, this is what stuff looked like in the 60s. It was just, you could tell that's just what they wore. That's the cars they drove.
The way they talk.
Stuff like that. Yeah. I love how, obviously no movie's 100% faithful, but this movie's pretty close to having like all the details down to like how the writing looked when he wrote the message on the car, like where he placed it, and everything is really close and like very faithful. So I love that. Jake Gyllenhaal, amazing, one of my favorite actors. Yes. Mark Ruffalo, forgot how good he was.
Yep.
Makes me really sad that we still don't have a Hulk solo film because he's got the chops.
Fingers crossed that they're setting it up. The teases are everywhere right now with She-Hulk that he's getting one. So
the only thing is, it's got to be a straight Hulk movie. Like, I don't want him to be the blunt or the brunt of a joke.
Right.
You know, he's got to be the Hulk. I want him.
Let him unleash a little.
See, this is why I feel like it's kind of a little late. They should have done this back in like phase 2. Maybe if you want to do a redo of the Incredible Hulk. But anyway, Mark Ruffalo, amazing.
Yep.
Robert Downey Jr.
Speaking of the
also
MCU,
amazing.
Yeah. Well, Gyllenhaal's MCU now too because of Spider-Man Far From Home.
So even all these Avengers and superheroes couldn't catch the Zodiac. So I don't know.
True. True. I mean,
very interesting hypothesis on who, because I know the movie is based on the book by Robert Graysmith, who was Gyllenhaal's character.
Right.
So of course he has his own idea on who the killer is, and it's very interesting very interesting theory, but this movie does play it as if, their suspect is the Zodiac towards the end.
Right.
The small difference that I will say that puts this at 3 is it's just a preference of mine, but you get less of the feeling that you are solving it with these characters as opposed to you're watching these characters solve it.
Right.
These next 2 movies, I feel like you're in it with them because you're trying to solve this as it's going. With Zodiac, you get to see the crimes from the eyes of the people that were there, not from Robert Graysmith's point of view.
Right.
And these other 2 movies, it's only from the point of view of these characters that we're focusing on. That's literally the only nitpick that I could separate.
Yeah.
Zodiac from these other 2, but number 3, Zodiac, all-time favorite.
Well, then I will just tell you, my number 2 is also Zodiac.
Nice.
My number 2 is also, like you said, most of the same stuff. One of the great thrillers of our time. I mean, it's one of those ones that when you mention that movie, most people know about it. Most movie buffs know about it. Acting superb from Ruffalo, Downey Jr., and of course Gyllenhaal. Again, this type of movie is where Gyllenhaal shines. If you've seen Nightcrawler, and I know you bought it, but I don't know if you've watched Prisoners yet. But similar kind of vibes. To me, this is just the type of role that Gyllenhaal's born to play. It's that kind of like frantic, kind of all over the place, but he does it so well.
Southpaw.
I still need to see that one.
That movie.
You talk about chemistry, like all of them had really good chemistry, but I do really especially appreciate the scenes with Robert Downey Jr. and Mark Ruffalo. Like, it helps knowing that, their chemistry and how close they are in the Marvel movies, but even outside, like in Zodiac, you can just tell that they work well together. The suspense is great. Again, it's a classic Fincher detective crime with some great shots and suspense. There's that suspense like you was talking about. Notably, my favorite scene in this movie, and the scene that always gets me, is the scene where he goes to the dude's house in the rain, and he's wanting to follow up on the posters, and he takes him down into the basement. That scene always gets me. That scene is so well shot. Amazing.
Yep.
But yeah, so that is...
he's in there and he turns the light on or off. I can't remember now. He's just... I'm like, oh, get out of there. But like, it's just that moment when they're sitting there talking and he's like, he didn't draw the poster. He's like, I did the posters by myself. And then you can see Gyllenhaal just be like, I need to leave now.
Yeah, it's time to go.
And that moment was like, ooh.
Yeah.
When you first watch it. It's so good.
Yep. So that is my number 2.
Well, this is the one that's going to get me in trouble.
Okay.
But my number 2 is 7.
Okay.
And I know everyone says that 7 is Fincher's best movie, and I won't argue that it's not. I just have one that I prefer more. And it's ever so slight. Like, I fought with this in my mind for days. But number 2 is going to be 7.
Okay.
Every time I watch a Morgan Freeman movie, I am reminded as to why he's so dang good.
Right.
Because I always seem to forget. I'm like, yeah, Morgan Freeman, he's a legend. And I just leave it at that. And then I watch a movie in a minute, and I'm like, dang, he was really good in that movie.
Yeah.
Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman together, kind of cool.
Excellent. Yeah.
Brad Pitt playing the impulsive young up-and-comer.
Yeah, the rookie kind of.
Morgan Freeman's the nice seasoned veteran.
3 days from retirement. Yeah.
Yeah. That whole thing is so cool. And of course, Kevin Spacey. I know he's kind of not a hot topic anymore, but this was like what, 97?
I think 95? So. It was 90.
It was 95
sure.
because my other movie's 97.
Right.
This was, before we knew anything of that, so obviously preface that with Kevin Spacey's performance in this is amazing.
Right.
That scene where he walks in and he's trying to get their attention and they're just, walking away. And he's like, detectives. And then, they're not listening. And he's like, detective.
Just
and I'm like, oh my gosh.
And he's just standing there with his hands. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're looking for me.
Like,
and I'm just like, this is so good.
The thing is, me and my wife have a saying that we usually go by with stuff like that. I mean, because the thing is, his real life actions are very problematic, but as an actor in a lot of his roles in movies, again,
Yeah.
L.A. Confidential is one of my favorite movies, and he does so good in that movie. Baby Driver, he does great in that movie. So we have a saying where we call hate the artist, not the art. And so anytime there's an actor or a celebrity or a singer or something that like we love their movies or their shows or even their music, there's a lot of musicians that are problematic, that we may not agree with everything they do or say in their real life, personal life. We're just like, well, we don't have to like them to appreciate the art or the characters and stuff. And Spacey fits that so well for me because he has left such a mark on incredible acting, all the way down to even Pixar. One of my favorite Pixar films is A Bug's Life, and he voices the main bad guy in that.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, he voices Hopper, the big grasshopper.
Nice.
Dude. And like again, I grew up with that. We grew up with that, and I remember like loving that. So I definitely agree with that part.
Yeah, I think it's a little different when it's all the stuff that you've watched before any of that came out. Afterwards, you have a different view on him when you see him again. But this was all before, and it's the weight of the crime. Like, no crime's good, but he didn't murder anybody.
Right. Well, so and he owned up to a lot of it
easier.
Too, from what I
being weird
recall.
At first.
Yeah.
But anyway, 7.
But the movie, yeah.
The iconic ending.
Yep.
Spoilers, if you haven't watched 7, what are you doing?
True. Yeah.
But when the whole "what's in the box" thing, and then just the way he gets around to it, and then he's just like, her pretty head, and the way he says it, because Kevin Spacey's he's really different in the way that he can portray different like emotions and characters with his voice without ever seeing him, because he plays the AI companion in Moon, the Sam Rockwell movie.
See, I still need to watch that.
All he is a voice in that movie, but he's so good. But Kevin Spacey, Brad Pitt, Morgan Freeman. I feel like I'm probably forgetting somebody, but 7 for sure. Out of all the movies on this list, though, does have the best like style and vibe, and it greatly influenced my favorite movie of the year so far, which is The Batman.
Oh yeah, I can see
The Batman's basically if Batman was there during 7 and not Morgan Freeman.
That's true. That's very true. I didn't think of that.
It's him and Gordon instead of Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman.
Right.
But
yeah, man, that works. I like that.
A little bit of Zodiac put into. So basically, Matt Reeves just played David Fincher for the Batman.
I mean, hey, it worked.
It does work. It has the best, not setting, but the best feel, the best vibes.
Yeah, it's got
like when I think about all these movies, I'm like 7, and I'm like, oh man, it's got that dark,
that gritty noir kind of
bleak. Like you said, it's raining.
Yeah, like a 90s, 2000s noir.
Yeah, I love it, and I love the fact that you only see the aftermath of what he's doing, because again, I like the story a little more. It's a little more engaging to me when we're solving it with them.
Right.
So all we see is what they see, and the aftermath's grisly enough.
Right.
And I love that Fincher did this, because I feel like not enough people do this when they do stories about detective stuff. They completely did not know what to do with this first one.
Yeah.
And then they got to the next one, and then realized, oh wait, there's something.
There's a pattern here. Yeah.
And then they go back to the first crime scene and find that I think was it not greed, gluttony maybe behind the refrigerator.
Behind the refrigerator, yeah.
And I was like, oh, like not enough movies. Like you go to this set piece, there's your answer. Oh, we're on to the next one. They found their thing. Like they completely botched the first one. They had nothing to go on.
Right.
And then from the next crime scene, they go back to that one, find the clue that progresses the whole thing along. I love that part of it.
So, I agree, because my number 1 is also 7, or is 7, which you knew. Again, 7 is one of those long-time favorites of mine. Again, you get to see a young Brad Pitt, the chemistry between Pitt and Freeman, like you were saying. They have excellent chemistry for two actors that, again, you wouldn't necessarily expect to have worked together, and they haven't worked together since, to my knowledge, but, man, they did so good together. That's what I said. It had a dark, gritty, always raining, and almost a comic book type aesthetic. Not necessarily a superhero comic, but it felt like, and you can, because me and you both have been reading a lot of like true crime graphic novels here recently. It felt like that almost, like he's talking about some of the over exaggeration of like the kills, like the scenes, the crime scenes, how grisly and brutal, and like just like the one dude looks like a skeleton. He coughs up on him, and the gluttony dude is just like this huge form,
He's
like
very massive.
Right, it feels like almost comic book proportions.
I felt the comic book thing, like you mentioned, was when they walked in and they had all those air fresheners hanging. Yep. There's like hundreds of air fresheners. I'm like, that one's straight from like a drawing. Like, right. That one really put me in there.
Feels like these creepy, like I just got done reading Torso by Brian Michael Bendis, which is about the Cleveland Torso Killer. And again, a lot of the scenes, it's the way it's drawn in that gritty kind of like over exaggerated brutal crime scenes.
Yeah.
I also put nothing says 90s like Brad Cliff getting the cliff notes for Dante Inferno.
I know.
He's like, man, I can't read this. Then he pulls out the Spark Note cliff notes and like, I'm like, man, that dated this movie.
I liked it too because most movies would then go back and make that as a weakness because he didn't like read it enough, but he actually got what he wanted out of just reading the cliff notes.
He was still able to carry on the conversation about it.
Yeah, and he, I don't know if Somerset was genuine when he was like, oh, you actually read it, because, with Morgan Freeman, he's so subtle. I don't know if he was being sarcastic or not, but he got enough information out of the notes.
Right, it goes back to that, the cliche, like you talked about, of the of the retiring detective with a young guy about to take his place. Like, literally, there's a scene when, like, Brad Pitt's moving his stuff in to the office while they're scraping Morgan Freeman's character's name off of there. I really liked the quote that I think it was Morgan Freeman made. It's either Morgan Freeman or Kevin Spacey. I can't remember now, but I specifically notated the quote he made about if a woman is being raped, that she should yell fire instead of help, because if you yell help, nobody's going to come. Because nobody wants to help nobody. And I'm like, that's such a deep, but like, man, even like nowadays, it's such a topical quote. Like, it's a lasting quote.
It's a few of those.
The only one takeaway, I'm still not the biggest Gwyneth Paltrow fan. She was fine in this, but like, even in like the Iron Man movies and stuff, like, she's an okay actor, but she's never been one of my favorites. A lot of people I know like are huge Gwyneth Paltrow fans. So I guess we just lost all of them for the podcast.
All three of you, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but I was thinking, I was like, man, maybe rewatching this movie, taking her out of the Iron Man thing, maybe, she ain't, but she's still just kind of meh. Like, it's not that she did bad, it's just that she wasn't as memorable as, like, Freeman and Spacey. Now, granted,
you say Seven, you don't think about her character.
Right. Which, I mean, again, you've got Spacey, Freeman, and Pitt in there, so it's going to be hard to keep up anyways. But I literally put that all three of them are unstoppable in this. My other favorite moment from this, he was talking about the what's in the box scene. And one of my favorite things, because the what's in the box scene has been so memed, it's become such a big meme, and it kind of frustrates me in a way, because I feel like it's such a good, really deep scene and it's very well acted, but everybody kind of makes a meme out of Brad Pitt's face in that scene. But to me, as someone who, has a wife and a daughter and stuff, and I'm a younger guy, kind of thing, like, I'm sitting here thinking, like, man, like, the range of emotion, we was talking about Spacey's range of emotion, but even Brad Pitt, for as young and fresh as he was, the range from when he's like making the face that gets memed, he's making the crying face, and he's like, oh, but then he just does this like sober up when he holds the gun, and then he just takes it and he's like, and he keeps coming back. Like, you see him flipping from like just depression and grief into anger. Like, it's a constant war, and he does such a good job of portraying both, and then in the end he ends up like shooting him. Like, it's just so well acted.
It's very well acted.
All the way around.
Instead of just staring at him, like, I feel like a lot of directors have him do, like, just stare at him and like zoom in on the eyes, and you get to watch him make this decision, and he's like, I'm gonna do it, like, I shouldn't, and he's like, crap.
And then when Spacey delivers that line, then Spacey gives the line, And
I
then
didn't know if
he's
he was
like,
actually gonna do it or not.
yeah, and then he's like, I'm gonna do it. And he just so
Yeah.
like,
and
and
he goes
Freeman,
for more after.
yeah, watching Morgan Freeman going back and forth. He's like, oh wait, is he going to do it? Don't do it. Is he going to do it? Like the three of them together, or like when they're in the car and he's like riling him up. When Spacey's in the back and he's just like trying to, he's like, don't you enjoy your work, detective? Don't you enjoy beating the wouldn't you enjoy beating the crap out of me? It's just so good. Like I said, it's 5-star. It's my number one. But your number one, since I know the only one that you've seen you've not talked about. I've not seen this movie, so I'm very curious to hear you talk about it.
Because spoilers would be kind of sad for this movie.
Okay, yeah, because I do want to see it.
Spoilers for this next one, because I want you to watch it.
It was on my Netflix list forever, and they took it off.
I had to go buy the Criterion just so I could watch it because it's not streaming anywhere. At least it wasn't last month.
Well, I'm gonna have to borrow it. So I don't know where to find it.
For those of you that don't know what other movie I watched, my number one is The Game.
Nice.
Right off the bat,
Michael Douglas.
Yes, Michael Douglas, amazing. I'm not sure that I've actually sat down and watched a Michael Douglas movie where he's like the lead actor. I'd have to really think on that and look it up.
I'm gonna have to think on it too.
I'm a big fan of Kirk. Kirk Douglas is one of my favorite actors.
Yeah.
But Michael Douglas was amazing in this, and people give crap about the ending. I'm not going to tell you what the ending is.
Okay.
For one, I don't know what crack they're smoking. I love the ending.
There was somebody else that's big in this movie.
There's Michael Douglas, and there's
their big name.
Sean Penn's in it.
Sean Penn, that's who I was thinking of. I love Sean Penn.
He's not in it that much, but he is in it, and he does good when he is in it.
Okay.
This is 97, so it isn't really baby face, nice, clean shaven Sean Penn. It's kind of weird.
Nice. I love Sean Penn.
But he was great. The story, though, the reason why this puts it over is because this was one of those movies where you're going through and you're trying to figure it out with him, because I don't even know if you know what the premise of the game is, but basically his brother, Sean Penn, Sean Penn plays his brother. He gives him, so Michael Douglas, to preface all this, he's the usual, he's the businessman, wealthy business guy. He's no fun, he doesn't do anything. He just does work and goes home and eats and then goes back to work the next day. That's the kind of guy he is. So his brother gives him this card for this business that's supposed to do a kind of like a game in real life, and because he wants him to have some fun.
Yeah.
And you can tell that Michael Douglas's character wants to have fun, even though he tries to convince himself that he doesn't.
Yeah.
But the whole point of this movie is he gets to a point where you can't tell if the stuff that's happening to this man is part of a game or not, and the way Fincher goes about directing this and weaving us through the story, you as the viewer are also sitting there like, wow, was that part of the game? Or is this not a game? Like, is this actually happening? Or are these people behind this? And I feel like that was just one of the most thrilling things I've seen in a long time, this whole story. Some people don't connect to it because they don't connect to Michael Douglas's character because he's a butthole. And I'm like, yeah, but you can see sort of yourself in it. Like on those days, I know for me especially, you have those days where you're just like, you're no fun. You're just all business, and then you're kind of, you don't go out of your way to be a butthole, but someone brings something to you and you just kind of brush it off. He's one of those kind of guys, and everybody has those days. So I connected to him because I'm like, man, I feel bad when I have days like that.
Yeah.
But that's just his whole character. But the thrilling part was trying to figure out, is this part of the game or not? And there's little details that you can see when certain things happen. We'll discuss it more once you watch it, me and you. Because
I'm going to watch it because I am curious.
There's a detail that I caught during the movie that I want to know if you catch it too.
Because it's within, I know the genre and like the basic, like you're saying, the basic premise and stuff is all in my wheelhouse. That basic kind of like suspense, thriller, mystery, cat and mousey kind of thing. Like I'm 100% there for that kind of thing, so I'm definitely very curious about it, and especially now knowing that you got it at your number one makes me really want to watch it.
Above 7, which is the part that's going to get me in trouble with people.
But that's the fun of it. That's the fun of this show, podcast, whatever you want to call it. is getting to give our spiel and our take on things.
Yeah, it's just a preference. Like, you catch me on a day where I'm in a real, like, actual detective mood, I'm gonna pop in 7 before I put in the game.
Right.
But if you ask me, like, which one I liked better when I sat down and watched them, I mean, it was real close, I mean, razor thin, but with 7, you feel like you're solving the case with the detectives, but you don't really have any leads to go on, because
Right.
he's John Doe, that's kind of the whole point. You
Yeah.
couldn't find him if you wanted to.
Yeah, he literally turned himself in.
Yeah, and if it wasn't for that, they never would have caught him. Like,
Right.
he was the fake paparazzi guy, for Pete's sake. I forgot
Yeah.
about that twist when I
Yeah,
watched
I
it the
did
second
too.
time. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I forgot about that. It's so good. But the game, it's all from his character's perspective, from Michael
Mhm.
Douglas's character. So you really feel like you're in it if, you vibe and connect with the movie, which I
Right.
definitely did. You really feel like you're trying to solve this, because, like, you're like, is this a game or is this not a game? Like, is he actually in serious danger,
Yeah.
or is someone gonna come help him? And you don't get your answer until the very end, which a lot of people, are upset about. I loved the ending, because all I'm gonna say is, you think you're getting one ending, and then it switches on you at the last second, and you're like, dang. A lot of people hated that switch, and I'm like, oh, I didn't see that coming. I was making the parallel with some other subplot they had going on, and then
Okay.
it switches on you at the last second. And you talk about twists and turns. That's one thing I'll give Fincher credit for. He gets credit for a lot of things, but the man knows a good
It's
twist.
got the good. Yeah, that's true.
He's usually got more than one in his movies.
That's true. Yeah.
This movie has plenty of twists, and it's my number one Fincher movie, over 7. Shoot me. Not really, but
I respect it.
you might not put it above 7 when you watch it, but I'm confident it'll at least dethrone Mank as number 5.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, from the way it sounds and from what I know, it probably would make it at least into my top 3. If
Yeah.
depending on where in the top 3, you never know. But
Yeah, it's a 5-star for me.
speaking of movies, I would like to tell you guys what we're watching next, which director or theme or genre, or I'd like to tell you guys, but I just don't know. I will say though,
I hold the power.
yeah, so it is Nathan's
The
turn
world's in my
this
hands.
pick. But I will say we have decided on a new formatting for it. So originally the goal was, no matter how big the director's catalog, we were just going to try to watch as many as we wanted, just pick and choose which ones we wanted to watch, and then pick a top 5 from those. But again, as we've learned in the past, with the past 2 episodes, it's been a little challenging.
Yeah.
And also,
Trying to watch 10, 12 movies in 2 weeks.
right.
When you
Also,
got full-time jobs and lives.
we run into situations like this where he watched the game, but he can't say as much spoilers because I've
Yeah.
not seen it and I want to. So from here on in, whenever we pick, whether it's a director, an actor, genre, like I said, it's whatever movies we choose to watch next, we will sit down. We're going to sit down and actually set 5 movies. We're going to keep it at a top 5, but we're actually going to pick 5. Probably try to start, because then if we do part 2s or part 3s for these categories or directors, then we can get others, but we'll probably start with like the most well-known ones, or easily accessible ones, and that way we're watching the same 5 and ranking the same 5. And I think that'll make it a little bit more organized and cohesive, and it'll make it easier on us to get through those and still have time to breathe afterwards and set with it. So
Yeah, because I've got to watch Cobra Kai this time. It just came out.
Yeah. Yeah, Cobra Kai. I'm excited for it. I was going to watch it today, but I knew that I had to work today, and I'm like, I'm just going to watch it fresh, starting tomorrow and Sunday, binge it. But speaking of binging, what's our next bi-weekly category?
I had a director in my head for about a week and a half, and I knew it was going to be this guy. And then yesterday I changed my mind. So, and it kind of already throws our format off a little bit, but I'll discuss here right after I announce it.
Okay.
My pick for these next 2 weeks is going to be the Universal Monsters. And the reason that throws off the our new format is because there's at least 7 of them. Because you've got Frankenstein, Dracula, Black Creature from the Black Lagoon,
Mm-hmm.
The Mummy, Invisible Man, and Phantom
Wolfman.
of the Opera, I think.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Wait, you already
so
said
that's seven.
Wolfman.
But the difference is we started off with Scorsese and Fincher, who both have quite a few 2.5 hour long movies.
Right.
A lot of these Universal monster movies run like 70 minutes, so I
Right.
could fit two in a day if I wanted to.
Same,
So we may
easily.
do a top five. We may do like watch seven of them and then just rank the seven.
Right. When
We'll
it's that
discuss
small of a
that.
catalog, it'll be easier to squeeze them in. But yeah, I'm excited
Yeah,
for this. Also, I mean, it's almost spooky season,
yeah. I'll
so
get kickstarted right
it's
here.
perfect to lead into it. And like I said, it doesn't always have to be directors. We can pick like genres, or like, like in this case, it's
Yeah,
kind of like a genre. Or even pick like actors. Just whatever strikes us in the mood and the topical. As long as we're able to get at least 5 or more movies and be able to make a top 5 on it, then I'm game for it, and I'm really excited about this. Um, some of those I've seen, some of them I've not. I have my personal favorite Universal monster, but again, that's just out of the ones I've seen, and I'm going to rewatch them
yeah.
all and try to remain as non-biased as I can.
Me too. Um, I do want just do. It's just the first movie in each respective character. So
Yeah,
like
yeah.
we won't be doing Bride of Frankenstein
Or
because
like
we
the
have Frankenstein's
crossovers.
monster. Yeah, it's just the first one of each of them. Well, I'd have to look at that because I don't know which Family Opera I actually own. Because I know there's a couple of those.
Yeah, yeah. We'll after the podcast here this weekend, we'll get
Yeah,
together and narrow down exactly
actually,
the
give
list.
me a second.
Okay. He went and got props.
I have the list right here. My handy dandy
Oh, nice.
monsters collection.
8 original
It
horror classics.
is the Phantom of the Opera, the 1943. So not
1943.
the original Lon Chaney one,
And
I
not Gerard
believe.
Butler.
Unfortunately, it's a good one.
It is a good one. I do like that one.
um,
Despite most people's opinions.
yeah, it's the 31 Dracula and Frankenstein, Mummy from 32, blah blah, all the originals. But then it's the 43 Phantom of the Opera,
Okay. Okay,
not
that'll
the
work.
Lon Chaney one, which I might watch that one on my own time
I
anyway
was gonna say
because
I like
Lon
Lon
Chaney's a
Chaney.
legend.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I really like Lon Chaney. All right, so that will be our plan. So join us back here
Spooky time.
for a next study in cinema, a study in
I
spooky
will take
cinema.
notes. I'm taking notes next time.
You going to take your own notes this time? Good, good, do it.
Yeah, because I'm going off of memory, and it makes it a little harder on like Mank and all these other ones. But
Yeah.
we get to the top, I remember everything almost. So
Yeah,
I'm gonna
yeah.
take notes on these so I can actually have a nice detailed description of what I like, rather than just like I like the sound, I love the vibe and the directing. Of course, I'm going to.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the way I've had to do. Like I said, I should keep using my notepad, but hey, this is a podcast. What do you expect from
Yeah.
us? So thank you guys so much for coming out, and hope you guys are listening. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, share, tell everybody, and be sure to check back in 2 weeks for the next episode.
See ya.
See ya.